Hello and welcome back to One Trek Mind with me, Raptor.
And me, Michael.
And today we are reviewing the next episode of Star Trek Discovery called Erigah? Erigah? I don't know how to pronounce the title of this episode.
Erigah.
It's a weird word, Erigah. So this continues on from the end of the last episode where we learn that Mol and Locke have been recaptured by Starfleet. And Discovery jumps in to discover that Mol and Locke, they're in custody, but Locke is in a very bad way. He's basically looking pretty much like he's gonna die. As a result, they're sort of trying to figure out how to keep him alive. They go back to Federation HQ where they find out that the Breen are on their way in a dreadnought because Mol and Locke are considered fugitives. And initially the Admiral wants Burnham and Discovery to take Mol and Locke away and basically do a runner away from the Breen. But Burnham talks him down and suggests that actually they try to find a compromise solution. Rayner is clearly not very happy around Breen. I think it's acceptable to say. There's clearly something
chip on his shoulder on that one.
Yeah, he's clearly a little bit uncomfortable with the idea of even negotiating with the Breen. He doesn't think it's possible.
Which, to be fair, given what we see in this episode and back in DS9, he's kind of right.
True.
They don't really negotiate at all, so he's not really wrong about that.
Tarina is back to negotiate with the Breen on behalf of the Federation president and reveals that basically the Breen are in the middle of a civil war after the Emperor died, and there's lots of warring factions, and one of the particular Primarchs of a faction is the one coming on the Dreadnought to get Mol and Locke.
Must be a complicated civil war, too. It's not even like there's two Primarchs. There's, I think she said 6. I was like, Jesus, that's gotta be complicated.
Meanwhile, Stammers, Tilly, and Adira are trying to figure out the last clue, which was the little Beta Z tag. And they're trying to figure out sort of where this is pointing them to go to. Basically, it turns out that the writing on the Betazoid tag relates to a particular book written in 2371 by the scientist who made the clue, and they need to find a copy of the original manuscript, which brings in Engineer Reno, and it was so nice to see and have more of her in this episode because I really like her as a character.
Wasn't in it for too long, though.
A manuscript expert. Turns out she's actually a smuggler in truth.
Yeah, she fudged her resume. I did love that.
Discovery got the first laugh it has ever gotten from me when Reno reveals being a bartender and having made a drink called 7 of Limes, which made me actually laugh out loud for the only time Discovery has ever accomplished that.
As soon as the episode ended, I googled 7 of Limes, and there's already memes all over of 7 of Nine's body with like a lime for the face. It's a wonderful thing that this show has created.
Have to make sure we have some pictures of those memes in the video. We discover that Locke is a direct descendant of the dead Breen Emperor, and this is why the Primarch wants him. He's basically going to use Locke to gain the throne. The Breen arrive in their starship, which I want to talk about after we finish the summary. The Breen arrive in their starship, and we have basically for the rest of the episode kind of a tense standoff sort of negotiation play out between the Federation and the Primarch, with sort of some of our characters, Rayner, Burnham, Tarina, the Admiral, basically trying to prevent a war while Stammers and the rest figure out the clue. And we have a few scenes in the medical bay as well between the Doctor and Mol and Locke at the same time. Eventually we discover what Rayner's problem is with the Breen. Did you want to explain?
Yeah, essentially his problem is he is a very heavy parallel to another Star Trek character, bordering on slight copycat in terms of the writing for it, but is very, very similar to Kira and her backstory on DS9. Because the Breen have, or at one point, claimed his home world as an outpost for I think it was for creating weapons and basically using the planet for its resources, and it's a very strategic location for them. And they subjugated its people. They don't exactly say how many people died. He even explicitly says, I don't know how many died. It was just a lot of people had died in the situation. He was the only surviving member of his family.
I mean, they infer that the planet has been polluted and trashed by them, like the Cardassians did to Bajor.
I mean, you can fix that, though. Like, they fixed Earth. They were on their way to fixing Bajor. Like, there's a chance that it could have bounced back at some point, but maybe not yet. But essentially, he's had very personal dealings with the Breen and knows firsthand that they don't negotiate with anything but substantial pushback and power pushed right in their face, which is why he believes negotiations are just a pipe dream and it's a waste of time and they should just show as much might as humanly possible, which again, the episode does kind of prove to be the case, with the exception of some excellent guile on the part of Burnham and Tarina.
Yes, Raina mentions that his planet was occupied by a Primarch Tahal, which is not the Primarch that has arrived at the base, and this will become relevant.
Yes, she is a rival Primarch.
Meanwhile, Mol and Locke basically start making up a plan to escape from custody, during which the Breen beam onto the station because the Federation claim they're going to hand them over. President Tarina wants to use the time to negotiate with the Breen, reveals that she can understand Breen when she expertly translates what was actually said by one Breen.
Which was a very Daenerys Targaryen moment from Game of Thrones. I'm sure some people would say it was kind of a rip-off of that, but I loved that moment. She's like, actually.
And basically she bluffs and claims that the Federation has already gotten an offer for Mol and Locke from this other rival Primarch Tahal, which initially the Breen don't 100% believe, and everyone draws weapons, and for a bit it looks like everyone's going to start shooting, and then Raina uses his knowledge of the Breen and his experience of Tahal to basically prove to the Breen that are there right now that the bluff is true, or to add further truth to the bluff.
It was a pretty smart play, if I say so myself. It was a rather clever way to maneuver that situation.
It all goes a bit wrong when Mol and Locke put their escape plan in action. Locke forces a massive injection of tricordrazine into himself, which I believe is a Star Trek painkiller. Mol beats up security in quite I want to say artistically shot, but not necessarily visually easy to understand in terms of its visual sense. It was lots of various angles and rolling around with the camera. It was very cinematic, but almost impossible to know what was going on.
I disagree. I'm like, that was not cinematic to me. That was a very pretentious way of shooting the scene. It felt like they had a specific type of camera or camera rig, and they really, really wanted to use it, even though it made the scene borderline unwatchable for me, because I'm like, I could not tell you what is happening. I know people are punching and flipping over each other, but I don't know, like, in what space of the room they're at, who is doing what. That scene drove me insane. Like, I would not call that artistic. For me, that was just very pretentious. I was like, someone needed to have told the cinematographer or the director, like, you're trying to do too much right here. It's not working. Slow the camera down a little bit. Let me see what's happening.
Burnham discovers that the escape plan has gone on and lets returning character Naan go off to recapture Mol, and she's going to go and get a medic from the Breen because, it's in their best interest to keep Locke alive. Which we were both really surprised. Like, for once, Burnham is actually letting someone else do the security action female bit, and she's going to go and do the captain bit.
I mean, yeah, I just particularly appreciated a scene for once having Captain Burnham do the diplomatic negotiations and someone else do the action, like, you can't really call it an away team, but the equivalent of that for this episode. Because again, as much as I like Captain Burnham as a character, it does kind of drive me crazy that she is always putting herself in the singular most dangerous position at all times. I'm like, dude, if you die, the whole crew loses their leader. Like, yes, you have your number one as a backup, but Raynor still isn't all the way there yet, I don't think. He's still growing as a character, so you definitely need to keep yourself around. And again, I get it. This show has very much made it a point that Michael Burnham is the main character. Most other Star Trek shows, with maybe the exception of, Picard, are complete ensemble shows, where you could argue the captain is the main character, and in most cases basically is, but they always give other characters a ton of time to take the spotlight and be the center of that episode. And this show does not do that. Like, they have very explicitly said that is not their intent. They want her to be the main character that you follow from beginning to end. So I get it, but it was really, really nice for her to not take the most dangerous mission or aspect of the mission on herself and go do the negotiations like almost every other captain would.
Meanwhile, Book helps Stammers figure out that the metal tag from Betazoid has some residual telepathicness to it, and he can use his strange commune with nature power is the best way I can describe it.
His empath abilities.
Yeah, his empathic ability to figure out some information about the metal tag. He discovers what latterly turns out to be that the tag is sending them to the Badlands, which was nice to see in full 4K modern VFX compared to when we last saw it. And actually, the Badlands is like one of a number of Deep Space Nine references, I think, in this episode, which was especially nice.
Yeah, we did get a lot of references to the Dominion War, obviously the Breen being a big part of it, and then the Badlands reference was very cool. Because, again, that was something I said when you showed me all of Star Trek to begin with, and you see it in DS9, you see it in Voyager. I don't remember if you see it in TNG. I don't think you do.
No, it's just DS9. DS9 and Voyager. Well, yeah. Voyager for the first episode.
I was gonna say, you start there in the Badlands in Voyager. But it was one of those things where I'm like, this is a really cool concept. I love what they're trying to do, but they don't have the effects to really effectively sell it. So I would love to see one of the modern Treks take on the Badlands so I can see that in modern VFX. I think that would look really cool. And here we got to see it, and it was just a brief moment, but I have to say, I think I was right. It looked very cool. I'm like, yep, that is a very neat looking Badlands right there. I can't wait to actually go to it in the next episode.
I mean, they didn't reveal it was the Badlands till the end of the episode, but the minute Stammers said, or Book said, plasma fields and stuff, I was like, that's the Badlands. I think
did
every
have a striking
resemblance got it.
Yeah, it had a striking resemblance, at least at the start of it, from the outside to the Scourge in the Mass Effect Andromeda game, which most people do not like for pretty good reasons. But as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, it looks just like the Scourge. And then when you go inside of it and you see the little swirling vortexes of plasma, I was like, oh, Badlands, nice.
Having discovered the Badlands, Book buggers off with Narn to go and stop Mole. And basically he talks her down using her affection for Locke as the main in to stop her escaping, to come back and be with Locke, because Locke's overdone the overdose that he used to get the escape plan on the go, and even with the Breen medic helping, Locke dies from the overdose. This naturally pisses off the Breen, who very quickly prepare for war.
Yeah, they sure did not hesitate on their decision there. They're like, well, we don't care how it happened. We don't care what the circumstances are. We told you if he died in your care, it would be war, and they sure meant it. Like, they were definitely going to do it.
Yep, 4 more Federation ships show up, but compared to the Breen Dreadnought, which again I want to talk about in a minute, it's a bit lacking. Mol reveals she's married to Locke, which means that she can be taken by the Breen. And she also, much to probably Burnham's dislike, reveals to the Breen the progenitor technology, or at least reveals that the Federation are looking for something, and uses this to basically ask to be given to the Breen. There's a bit of a debate between all our Federation characters. Everyone is pretty much for it apart from Book, who is the only one who really voices any opinion against it.
And not for the reasons that you did as well. He basically took the approach that I normally do when I don't agree with the Starfleet or Federation law. I'm like, it's just not right, man. Like, this morally doesn't feel right. We should not do this. Even though tactically it was 100% the best decision to make.
Yes. And we will discuss why I'm not 100% with it either in a minute again. But basically, the Federation characters and Tarina decide they can't really do anything. They do have the speed advantage over the Breen, thanks to Discovery Spore Drive, so they give Mol up, which really pisses Book off. The Breen leaves. Stammers tells the crew that the next location in the Badlands is this eternal library where they believe they'll find a manuscript. Basically, this library is described earlier in the episode as a repository of any knowledge from any civilization. It's like a neutral ground repository of knowledge, which reminded me of something similar that's in Minecraft, which Michael was a bit puzzled by, but I'll explain it here. So in Minecraft, there is like this uncensored library that anyone from any country can go to and read material that is censored in their country. So it's kind of like a similar thing. It's like a neutral place for everyone to read anything that might be blocked in their native country.
Okay. Yeah, like I never played Minecraft. I don't know. You said Minecraft and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry.
And the episode ends with Rayner and Burnham talking about how difficult it was for Rayner to deal with this whole situation and his history with the Breen. And, you know, it's kind of made up a little bit because at the beginning of the episode, Rayner was acting borderline xenophobic and kind of got in trouble. And initially, I think we both thought that, oh god, Rayner's gone off the rails again after all of this progress he'd made. But actually, I think now we know a bit more. I think it makes a bit more sense.
Yeah, I was worried they were going to draw a parallel to his mutiny, or to Burnham's mutiny with the Klingon situation, which they did bring up, and I actually did like that they brought that up for a moment. She's like, yeah, well, I was faced with a similar situation, and I made a real bad decision. He's like, yeah, how'd that work out for you? So it's clear he's like, I will not be making a decision like that the same as you did. Which I was happy about.
But yeah, that's a very quick summary of the episode. And overall, compared to last week's episode, I'm overwhelmingly a lot more positive about this episode. Again, because it was another of those traditional Star Trek episodes, you know, having to negotiate with a warring faction and such. But I liked all the other elements, the figuring out of the tag, the DS9 references, the fact that we got a lot more of the crew involved in this particular episode. The Breen felt like a genuine threat. It just all came together better for me than perhaps last week's episode. I do have my problems with this episode, but overall, I'm like, this was a good episode for me.
I mean, I would agree. Honestly, I still don't know if I like it more than the last one, just because I am a huge fan of the more episodic, single story Star Trek episodes, and I really did enjoy the last one. But I did appreciate the genuine tension here. There were several moments where I was
lots
like,
of atmosphere.
Ooh, this is not looking so great for the Federation. And they actually did make some bold swings in this episode as well. I thought for sure they would kind of return to the status quo, especially when that's literally what they say they want to do. They're like, here's what we're going to do. Because we've made this pretend deal with this other Primarch, you're going to leave us in peace. We're going to return to the status quo. and we'll figure all this stuff out later. And I thought for sure that was actually how it was going to go. And then when Locke actually died, that really threw a wrench into the whole story and did shake up the dynamic of what Maul's character is going to be doing, which I highly suspect she is going to betray the Breen in a big way. Not sure how, but I think it's safe to say she's not just gonna join up with them and be buddy-buddy. But now the Breen have become a significantly larger threat as well because they're aware of the progenitor tech, and she is probably actually going to lead them to it just so she herself can get to it. I mean, they suspect she's gonna try and resurrect Locke with that technology, which I highly suspect is going to happen. Not the biggest fan of that, just because this show in particular seems to have a problem with killing characters and then bringing them back to life, but I'm almost sure that's what's gonna happen in some way or another. But again, it did really shake things up, and I didn't expect it to. I thought, this is a tense episode, but it's going to return to a more neutral ground, possibly with Maul and Locke actually joining up with our crew and becoming, unlikely allies, and that is not at all what happened. So I was pleasantly surprised with the turn of events in the episode. But there were aspects of it that I didn't like.
Yes, let's get on to the nitpicks we have here.
You want to start with the Dreadnought? Because for me, that's probably not a nitpick, but I get the sense it might be for you.
It's not a nitpick for you. It is a little for me, for a few reasons. Firstly, the Breen Dreadnought looks nothing like the Breen ships we have seen elsewhere. It's basically a brick. It's slab-sided, very angular. To me, it looked more like a Borg ship than a Breen ship, down to the green lighting everywhere.
That's kind of a good point. It's very geometric shape. You have your cubes, your spheres, and I could see that being... what are those ships called? Assimilators? What are they called?
Oh, you mean the big Vija ships, the assimilators that Star Trek Online
Yeah, I was
invented.
It looked kind of similar to that. Again, very brick-like, although this did have, I guess, a few more angles to it.
That's not my main niggle with it, though. My main niggle is it is flipping enormous compared to everything else around it. Like Federation HQ, this is a starbase that moves, and actually it comes apart, and each part of it is a starship in itself. This is already a big structure. The Breen Dreadnought is colossal in comparison. It is enormous, and it's not just a little bit bigger. It's like hundreds of times bigger, and it just feeds into this slightly annoying thing the modern Trek has been doing ever since, I would argue, kind of Star Trek Nemesis with the scimitar, and then Star Trek Into Darkness with the Vengeance.
The giant Federation Section 31 ship. It's black and it's evil.
The bad guy's ship must be massive, because if it's massive, it's an obvious and very clear threat. And it's just a bit... I'm going to use the word childish, but it's because that is the sort of thinking behind it. It's like, it's big and super massive, therefore it must be super dangerous, and it just kind of annoyed me.
I mean, on one hand, I also was a little bit sure, make the Dreadnought formidable and scary, but that enormous is a little insane, because again,
it's like bigger than a Borg cube. It's like bigger than probably 10 Borg cubes.
I don't know 100%, but I'm assuming that Federation HQ is much, much larger than the main space dock. But I'm assuming it has to be much bigger than the space dock near Earth in all the Legacy shows, which was already utterly massive. Big giant mushroom space station that can house thousands of ships. So for this Dreadnought to just completely dwarf it, it's less than a quarter of the size of the thing, it was a little bit much. I'm like, okay, that yeah, it's dangerous and it's a little scary, but that is so big. I'd be willing to assume that that is much, much bigger than any Borg cube or sphere we've ever seen. Maybe with the exception of the one in Picard. Spoilers for Picard if you haven't seen it, but the one that is stationed in the big storm on Jupiter and everything, because that Borg cube was insanely massive as well.
Like, they haven't said, basically, in any technical information anywhere how big it's supposed to be. But considering it's easily far bigger than Discovery, and Discovery herself is 750 meters long, there and thereabouts. And I would estimate that Fed HQ is probably about 4 times the size. So that's already 2 kilometers. Like, a Borg cube is about 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters square. So that Breen dreadnought, like, Fed HQ is about twice the size of a Borg cube. And that dreadnought then, therefore, must be like 10, 20 times that size. It's enormous.
Yeah, it was pretty utterly massive. Again, it's not a huge deal to me, but I can see...
It's not a huge... It is a nitpick, I accept, but it was like...
It is kind of a continuous thing that they keep doing, so I can see why it's like, okay, come on now. Like...
And the fact it didn't look very Breen either was kind of a disappointment, because I was kind of hoping we'd get like a 32nd century version of the Breen ships from DS9, and we didn't, which was a bit disappointing.
I don't mind that too much. One, because Discovery has, for the entirety of its run, really changed the look of a lot of things in Star Trek, for better or worse. I would argue mostly for worse, but occasionally for better. And it is also 1,000 years in the future, so I'm like, I can accept that in that amount of time things would change pretty, maybe not drastically, but in some pretty big ways it would alter its appearance. So the actual design of it, I was like, I'm fine with it. They kept the green lights, which for me was like the signature Breen thing. Again, if it's Romulan, Borg, or Breen, it better have some green lights on it, or you did it wrong. Like, you just did it wrong. So they got that, and I was like, alright, I'm cool with it. It was more the size of it that I was like, okay, that's a bit much.
Before I get to my bigger nitpick, did you have any sort of smaller nitpicks to talk about?
I already discussed the fight scene with Locke, or the fight scene with Maul, and I just despised whoever decided to do that flashy cinematography right there, because I thought it was really distracting and, as I said, kind of pretentious. I guess another nitpick of that scene again is just these are 2 of the biggest criminals in the Federation currently. Like, they are number 1 priority, and they have 2 guards in there with regular phasers, and that's it. I was like, come on, guys. Like, you're kind of asking for them to escape if that's all you have on them. And also, like, the Doctor just very, very quickly shuts the shield down without thinking about it, which, again, I can kind of accept Culber being like, no, this is my patient, I need to save him right now, but, like, come on, guys, use your heads just a little bit here. And she also got out of those restraints super easily, I might add. Like, they added, we're gonna have this, cryo bed for Breen, because it improves their immune system, and it was working rather well. But they didn't think to, I don't know, check if the alloy that is holding her in those shackles could be easily frozen by, some of those things. There were just a few logic nitpicks on that, where I'm like, you guys gotta improve on your security, because, that was a piss poor job right there. They pretty effectively managed to keep her on the ship, because even before she was, talked down by them, it didn't seem like she was going to be able to actually get a shuttle, so I was like, well, it could be worse, but I had a slight issue with that. And another slight nitpick I had was the Admiral, at the very beginning, even proposing that they just make a run for it with Maul and Locke. I'm like, that seems like a terrible idea, dude. Like, would that not send the worst possible message to the Breen that, yes, we have what you want, and it's valuable to us as well, so we're going to run for our lives with it? Like, why would they not attack you at that point? To me, that just seemed like a really stupid idea, and I'm really glad Burnham talked him out of it very quickly. She's like, look, we can run around all we want, but eventually they're going to catch up, and we're going to have to deal with this eventually, so, like, let's deal with it. And I thought it was kind of weird that it wasn't the reverse, where Burnham was the one saying, like, oh, this is super important, I think we should make a run for it, and the Admiral of Federation HQ wasn't the one saying, like, no, like, we're gonna take the diplomatic approach and we're going to do this the right way. I just thought it was kind of weird. I mean, I guess he lived through the burn, and that did alter a lot of people's perceptions on other species and races and everything, but it was just a bit odd to me. Other than that, I was pretty much all good with it. I really like seeing Tarina again. I will say that was a big plus for me. I'm like, yes. Oh, I love her. She's so great.
And, you know, maintaining that bluff and everything was, you know, as Worf says, you know, I appreciate a good bit of guile.
And
it was
she certainly proved that.
Well, ghoul, wasn't it? It is ghoul, isn't it? Unprecedented levels of ghoul, he said. That was definitely a ghoul moment from Tarina.
I mean, the way she presents herself almost gives me a Duchess vibe from, like, Downton Abbey. Like, you do not...
Oh, the Dowager Countess.
Yes, the Dowager Countess. Like, you do not mince words with this woman. She will put you down every single time, and I just really love her, so it was nice to see her. A little disappointing there was no Saru. Seemed like a good opportunity to bring him in, but, as an article recently stated for us, he was busy with something else at the time, so he will not be returning to this season just yet.
So my last nitpick, and I don't really think it's a nitpick, but it's more of a philosophical question here. We're told that the Breen are in the middle of a civil war, and that there are many factions fighting for the throne. This to me is a similar situation to the Klingon civil war that is presented in The Next Generation, where you have a factional conflict that's taking place in another civilization. I mean, at least according to the rules of Next Gen, and I'm sure it's probably cropped up in other Star Trek episodes where this sort of thing has been happening. Technically, by the rules of the Prime, I believe it is the Prime Directive that covers this as well. The Federation cannot interfere with the internal political affairs of another civilization, which is why Starfleet doesn't directly get involved with the Klingon Civil War, although they do get involved indirectly. Now, to me, by agreeing, whether or not they were going to do it or not, agreeing to give up Mol and Locke to one particular faction of this Breen Civil War, is that not getting yourself involved in the conflict? Because basically the Federation is picking sides in a conflict that isn't theirs, which could have wide-reaching ramifications for the other empire, which, you know, isn't theirs.
Again, my counter to that, personally, is for two things. One, the Breen Primarch directly threatens them. He says, if you do not do exactly as I say and give me these people, we're going to kill you all. It is an act of war. It's not even just we're going to kill you specifically, we are going to destroy the Federation. Like, it will be all-out war again. We're going straight back to the Dominion War. It's not going to be a fun time for anybody, so do what we say. So they're kind of forced to make a choice one way or the other. And even if they kept her, that would still be getting involved in their politics, in my opinion, because again, she is married to Locke, which means that she has that bloodline, you know, by their law and everything. So if they had kept her, that would almost be worse, because they are now harboring one of their royal bloodline, and again, still being directly involved in the conflict. Like, the fact that they even collected them as prisoners, like, that, the deal was sealed at that point. Like, we are now involved in this. Like, they didn't realize at the time that was what the issue was. And if they had, I highly doubt they would have even brought them in as prisoners. They would have thought twice quite hard about that one. But they did, and as a result, they are now very, very much involved. So I don't think the Prime Directive is broken by it, because again, like, they are now a part of it, whether they want to be or not. It's no longer an internal affair.
It does heavily remind me of like how the Klingon Civil War even started, which is that Picard was made the arbiter of succession for the next Klingon leader. Picard did try to get out of it and was convinced to take part in it, even though technically it is also breaching that sort of non-interference policy. I think the difference between the two for me is that Picard actively like said to Kempek, like, I can't get involved in this, it goes against the Federation law, and was then talked into it. Whereas here, I think it was just missing like a couple of sentences of dialogue, like someone just mentioned perhaps like, are we not interfering in another nation's civil war, and is that not a problem? Like, and even though, I mean, I agree with you in a way, they're kind of, their hands are tied. But I just think it would have been nice to have like some awareness to the fact that they're kind of involved in now a very messy conflict, which is probably not what the Federation at this time wants to be getting involved in at all.
No choice anymore.
And I'm not saying it is a Prime Directive break. I just think it's a philosophically open question about whether it is or isn't. The last thing I wanted to say was just kind of do a little wrap, because there were so many references to DS9 in here, which was so nice to see. More than you've got the references to the Badlands. We get a lot of references to the Breen's attack on Earth that occurs in the Dominion War. We also get a reference. Rayner wants to use a plan of Thoron fields and Duranium shadows to make Federation HQ look more powerful than it is, which is a tactic straight out of Deep Space Nine that actually gets mentioned twice. The Cardassians think the Federation are doing it, and the Klingons think the Federation are doing it. Two different moments in DS9. So I love the idea that even 800 odd years into the future, this tactic is still applicable.
I mean, hey, if it works, it works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I guess Seven of Limes is both a Voyager and Picard reference, since she's a pretty notable character in both.
Also, the way that Reno sort of reads out how many things she's been involved with, and the fact that she was like apparently a manuscript smuggler, it reminded me of the engineer from Strange New Worlds.
Yes, me too.
Yes.
As soon as she said like, oh yeah, I used to be a smuggler, I was like, so she's just like Alpelia.
She just instantly reminded me of her. Like, I was almost convinced that maybe they were going to try to infer that maybe they are one of the same, but or at least related or similar species or whatever. But it just made instantly reminded me of her.
It's a lanthanite. Reno could be a lanthanite. They look exactly like other humans. They lived among us for forever, apparently.
We also have the reference to the year 2371, which is a very big year for lots of Star Trek events. I believe that is the year Voyager goes missing, 2371. I believe it's the same year as the Dominion War starts. All sorts of stuff happens in 2371.
It was a bad year.
It's a very important year.
Wasn't great for everybody.
I was glad that Tarina tries to get the blood debt paid by offering the Breen 45 tons of refined dilithium as just a little, again, another little nod to season 3. Given that season 3 basically got rid of a lot of dilithium from the galaxy, it was nice to just have another reference just to, remind us that yes, dilithium is still a rarity. That's quite a good sort of offer.
Another, I guess, small detail on that is the fact that I didn't really pick up on it while we were watching, but now I think it makes a bit more sense. They were saying, the Breen are on their way and they're at maximum warp. And on one hand, it's sort of like, okay, they mean business. They really want to get here as fast as humanly possible. But with dilithium also being such a rare resource now, it's like they really want to get here right now. They're willing to waste more resources that are kind of difficult to get currently in order to be here as soon as possible. So there's even more weight to that, which is kind of nice.
Oh, and Rayner makes a reference to the adage that we first hear in Deep Space Nine, which is never turn your back on a Breen.
Which is so accurate.
Okay, so lots of nice little references to Deep Space Nine in this episode. I don't have anything other to say about it. Do you?
No, I liked the episode. You know, some nitpicks here and there, some minor issues, but overall, some pretty bold strokes. It was pretty good. It got me further invested in where we're going with this in the final 3 episodes.
I am looking forward to seeing the Badlands again.
I'm very excited for the Badlands. I'm like, ooh, baby, I'm gonna get to see this in 4K. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, let us know down in the comments what you thought about this particular episode, and don't forget to also subscribe to the channel if you're new for the rest of our reviews on Star Trek Discovery. But until then, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.